Hello everybody and welcome to Disney World Playlist. This is the fun new series I have where basically I wanted to take a look at attractions and restaurants and resorts at the parks in a very different way, and so we're putting together these playlists. And the idea is at the top of an episode I introduce a theme, and in the past it's been video games and Indiana Jones and nostalgia, like very broad themes like that, and I put together a daily short itinerary for the day at Walt Disney World with attractions and restaurants and places that I feel like fit that theme. And most of them are coming from suggestions from subscribers like you guys out there. And one that caught my eye because it seemed like a trap, but it also ended up being a really cool one to do, was a theme or a playlist based on classic films. Now, I said it seemed like a trap because I felt like there was a very easy way to go about this. If I wanted the easy way out, I could just spend the day in Fantasyland. You have Peter Pan, and you had, you previously had Mr. Toad, and you had Snow White. You had all these rides based on classic Disney animated films. And I guess for some of you, you could almost call like the Toy Story rides classic and things like that. But I wanted to avoid that. So I have a playlist. We're going to go through it. I put it all in like a good order, so it sort of makes sense today. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm going to guess that besides one thing on this list, I suspect none of you would have picked this. Maybe you would. Maybe you would have. We'll see. Anyway, I'm starting here in the Magic Kingdom because this is where the playlist actually kicks off, and we're going to head on over to Adventureland. I can actually tell you as we head on over that none of this playlist takes place in Fantasyland. Not a bit of it. Anyway, our first stop is actually right here, and it is an attraction based on the 1960 film, The Swiss Family Robinson. And this is, of course, the Swiss Family Treehouse. And it's an old film, one of the older Disney films. Where's the entrance? Oh, it's over here. And the premise of it is that basically this family gets stranded during, I think it was like a boat wreck, and they're just stuck on this island. And of course, in like really fantastical nature, they build like this really awesome tree house where they all live happy. And it's not at all like, say Castaway, where you have to pull out your own teeth or anything like that. It's everybody's got like their own room, and it's a really nice enjoyable experience. This is the style of Disney that I thought of when I thought of classic movies. I know a lot of people probably thought of animation, but for me it was mostly the live action stuff, the 1950s, the 1960s live action Disney films. I think they had a special quality about them, and I think it is something you can't put your finger on. I think it is a combination of a lot of things, including, the film quality and the audio quality of the era, and just the writing style of the time, and, Disney storytelling style. And I think when you put them all together, I think of films like The Parent Trap, which are my favorite, and, The Love Bug, and films like that, I think just have a special feel to them that pops to mind when I think of classic films at Disney. And we actually don't have to go very far for our next stop on the playlist. In fact, let's fly on over here to stop number 2, and that is the Jungle Cruise. Now, the Jungle Cruise itself isn't based on a classic movie per se. There is no Jungle Cruise movie. However, it is known that Walt was heavily inspired by the African Queen, the 1951 film starring Humphrey Bogart. And, I think to the extent that one of the boats on this attraction is named after the film, although I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd have to look it up. But there's another one where it's just like, 1950s. That is classic cinema right there. And it's very reminiscent of, that time period. So for me, the Jungle Cruise, while not being directly related to a classic film, has enough of a connection and roots in it that it reminded me of classic films. And then we're going to head on over to Splash... No, we're not going to Splash Mountain. Tricked ya. That seems like a low-hanging fruit one. No, we're going to grab lunch here in Frontierland, and we're going to grab lunch at Pecos Bill Tall Tale Inn and Cafe. Now, I guess I'm sort of stretching things a little bit because, you know, classic films imply like feature length. This not necessarily so, but Pecos Bill was actually an animated short made by Disney in May of 1948. So we're talking super old, and it was about, well, Pecos Bill, the legendary Pecos Bill. And so I feel like maybe lesser known, this is where I would go grab some lunch. I also just, you know, coincidentally love this place for lunch. They do, I think, what is it, a taco salad that is just like fantastic. And it's great. I love it. I love this place. I think it reminds me of, you know, you think of classic animation, and I think the first thing you think of is stuff like, you know, Peter Pan and Snow White and stuff. But if you go even further back, you know, you've got the shorts that Disney sort of founded the whole company on, right? Which is, you know, that's before Snow White sort of proved that feature film length animated pictures could be done. There was the shorts, and Pecos Bill was a short, you know, among all the others, and I think it was really cool. I actually remember watching it. I actually, you know, I almost want to go back and thank my dad for, you know, an upbringing where I got to see a lot of these shorts that were, you know, obviously I wasn't around in the 40s or 50s or 60s. I wasn't around until the late 80s and 90s, and yet I still got to grow up with a lot of these animated shorts, so I have an appreciation for them. And there he is, actually, on the sign right there. There's Pecos Bill. There he is. So that's where we'd grab lunch, and then we would head on over to a new theme park for the other half of the day. Come on, you had to have seen this one coming. The Great Movie Ride in Hollywood Studios. This was the one I assumed people would guess and would put on their own list. And this is, yes, definitely low-hanging fruit, but when in need, I'm going to grab that low-hanging fruit. The Great Movie Ride is an ode to classic cinema. This is perfect for a classic films playlist. You know, between Indiana Jones and you have the Busby Berkeley musicals and Singing in the Rain, and you have The Wizard of Oz. I mean, it's just oozing with classical films, and you have those trailers at the beginning. And if you go back and you look at some of the past playlists, I really gush about this attraction because it is one of my favorite here in Hollywood Studios. But I think it is definitely a no-brainer when it comes to classic films and doing sort of an itinerary or playlist for classic films. Because even if you're not a fan of, say, Indy, or maybe you're not a fan of Casablanca, there's bound to be one scene in this that is from a movie that you love. And so this is why it would be on my playlist. And for our next ride, we're actually going to stick around in Hollywood Studios. Go figure, a theme park about the movies is where I'm going to go ride attractions that remind me of movies. It pains me to say it, but Star Tours and Star Wars by association is entering into the realm of classic cinema. You know, when I was born, it was only like a decade old, and now it's much older than that. And we have 6 films and we have 3 more on the way. And even though it's still contemporary, I think this attraction, which is, you know, the Star Wars attraction, it does remind me of classic films. A little less so more now because they did the refurbishment, and so it brings you to a lot of places from the prequels. But the older one, I think, was such a, you know, this wish fulfillment and this throwback to Star Wars, where, you know, what you wanted to do as a kid is you wanted to do that Death Star trench run, and you got to live that in this attraction, and it was just very much a very exciting experience, and it reminds me of one of my favorite films of all times, and definitely, you know, a classic. I mean, there's no question, obviously, it's going to go down in history as one of the most important films of all time, and I will argue that. You know, a lot of people will think that, you know, it's just a sci-fi movie, it's a blockbuster, but George Lucas and Lucasfilm and Star Wars have set so many precedents for the film industry going forward from 1977 on that it has touched every corner of cinema since then, whether it's the, you know, revolution of special effects or just the birth of the concept of the summer blockbuster. This movie was very important to film, and so it definitely earns a spot on my playlist for classic films. And then we don't have to actually go very far for dinner, because that's right, yes, we're going to the SciFi Dine-In again. And this is another, you know, I wanted to avoid continuing using this place because it shows up on so many of my playlists, but this one I think is very related to classic film. If you've never been on it, on the inside are a bunch of cars, and it's made to look like you're at a drive-in movie theater, and you eat while watching a reel that plays all of these trailers and clips from classic sci-fi films. Now, granted, they're not, you know, amazing films. They're awful, cheesy, B-rated sci-fi films, but they have their own home in the history of cinema, and you've got, you know, even famous bad films like Plan 9 from Outer Space. So I think this is definitely one that, you know, reminded me of classic film, because you sit there and you get to watch it, and it's like an hour-long loop, and it's got some classic sci-fi based animations. It's got, you know, the classic film trailers. It even has the little intermission animations that play, or that used to play, in the old-time movie theaters. So, you know, whether it's one or the other or the third, they still all reference classic film in one way or another. And then to finish off the day, we're actually going to head on over to another park for what I'm going to guess, and I hope in the comments you let me know if it's true or not, is going to be the most unexpected of the attractions for this playlist, I hope. Wait, what? We're in Mexico? In Epcot? That's right, we're in Mexico in Epcot, because we're going to end off this playlist over at the Grand Fiesta Tour starring the Three Caballeros. And of course, if you're old enough to have remembered, or you've watched it, this attraction features the Three Caballeros, which was an animated film that Disney put out in 1944 that was sort of part of a goodwill program with South America. You know, Disney went on a tour, I think it was when they were building the Panama Canal, and he visited all these countries, and they decided to make this animation based on it. And you had Donald Duck, and you had his two South American buddies. Of course, I forget their name. I haven't watched it since I was a little kid. And it's a really, really fun short. In fact, it's one that I think I'm going to go watch after this, because it's just so many great memories. I grew up watching that. I had it on VHS tape. And so while the ride's not necessarily based on it, since they did, I believe, add them into it after the attraction initially opened, you know, it does remind me of a very classic Disney piece of animation that has a cool history about it. You know, it wasn't like Snow White or Cinderella where they just decided, hey, we're going to make this movie. You know, it was very inspired by Walt's personal trip to South America, and it was part of a program. You know, this was right towards the end of World War II, so you know, there's a rich history to it. And of course, what I have recently added to this series is I pick a hotel to stay at. Now, this one I feel like also had some pretty low-hanging fruit. We could have done the animation resort, we could have done the All-Star Movies resorts, but I picked the Port Orleans Riverside. And the reason why I picked it is because we never specified classic Disney films. And if you've never been there, it is made to look like basically the old Deep South. It was very antebellum South, which is like very fancy mansions, very big Southern styled mansions. And for me, when I went and stayed there, it reminded me very much of like the sort of setting of Gone with the Wind, the classic 1939 film, which, by the way, I believe adjusted for inflation is still the #1 top grossing film of all time, which is insane. Just goes to show how big film was back then. But, you know, it reminded me very much of that. So that's why I picked that hotel for this classic film list. I would love to know what you guys think, both for my picks, whether they were good or bad, or what you would put on this. Like I said, I think the first jump when you think about a classic films playlist with Disney would be, you know, the animated films. But I really tried to keep it away from, you know, the easy picks. And I would be curious to see what you guys would put in your playlist. And if you have an idea for a certain type of playlist, also let me know in the comments below, because like I said, many of these are taken directly from your suggestions. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching. If you want to reach me, I'm on Twitter @RobPlays. If you want to help out the channel, the best thing you can do is tell a friend. Maybe they'll enjoy these videos as much as you do. Have a fantastic weekend. Whatever you do, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you all next time for the next episode of Disney World Playlists. I promise I'm going to get Christine to do one of these soon. After PAX, probably. Bye, everybody.